Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Blunderbirds, in which we'll be rescuing 4 Kerbals from the surface of Eve. In fact, we'll be rescuing them from Eve's ocean, is the phrase I would have liked to have started this video with. We'll get to that in a second, but this is not an episode of the Blunderbirds, but rather just a regular old boring episode of KSP videos by Matt Lowne. But it's kind of cool in a way, because this week we're going to be tackling the final boss of Kerbal Space Program. Yes, it doesn't really have a story mode or, boss fight, but if there were a final boss of KSP, it would almost certainly be an Eve landing. And to make things even harder, we're going to be landing not just on Eve, but Eve's ocean. So it's very hard to make a lander that can land in water anyway, or whatever liquid manifests on Eve's surface, probably just pain, liquid pain, but also the fact that Eve's atmosphere is very, very thick below sort of 1 kilometer, sort of 1 kilometer and down. It's very, very thick, the atmosphere. Like it's a completely different ball game making an Eve lander that can take off from like a kilometer above the surface to an Eve lander that can take off from sea level, basically. There's a huge difference there. So I like to think that it's a pretty tough mission anyway, and to make things even harder, we're going to be having a crew capacity of not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 6, but 5. Just because I kind of wanted to make a sort of universally, like Swiss Army knife Eve lander, one that could pretty much do anything you need it to for Eve. So you've got your high crew capacity if that's what you need, or you could just swap out the kind of peripheral or surplus crew modules and replace them with science or auxiliary units, whatever you want really. So I've made quite a few Eve landers thanks to my Expedition Eve series. Let's see, I made one Eve lander back in 2015. It was awful. No one should try and replicate that. Don't copy that lander. It's a shame. I kind of regret that video away because people have tried replicating it. I've seen it on these KSP subreddit, it was inspired by Matt Lowne. I'm like, don't. It was a terrible lander design. I wasn't very good at the game when I first started this YouTube channel. I mean, it's not great now, but I'd like to think I've developed at least somewhat in my abilities. But yeah, there was that one. And then I made a couple of Expedition Eve landers. We'll cover those in a second. And then in an episode of the Blunderbirds, I actually did an Eve rescue, just rescuing a Kerbal from land. But that video was that mission in its entirety was much, much easier than this because it was taking place from what exactly? I've just checked the footage now to make sure. But that lander was taking off from exactly 1 kilometer above sea level. So now we're kind of making it a little bit harder. You'll notice just how much harder this mission is. That rocket featured, I think it was only 2 engines. It was just 1 vector for tackling the atmospheric, the bulk of the atmosphere, and then there was just a Terrier engine at the top just to do the last part of it, and there was a kind of a separate orbiting mothership to get back to Kerbin. This, on the other hand, is a sea level lander with 5 times the capacity of that ship, and you can see that reflected in the actual scale of the lander itself. And I said I was going to come back to the Expedition Eve landers. This is actually a fairly similar size to the Expedition Eve Ocean lander. For those that don't know, I did a series I did a miniature film called Expedition Eve, and one of the episodes of that featured a mission in which I sent a lander to Eve's oceans and then returned it to Kerbin. But that lander is actually a fairly comparable size to the one in this video, paradoxically, because that only had a capacity for 1 Kerbal. But the difference between this and the Expedition Eve landers, I said I'd cover them later. This is why. The reason this is a comparable size, even though it's much, much more versatile and capable, is because of the fact that this is not a direct ascent mission. And by direct ascent, I mean most of you might be familiar with the term Apollo style in Kerbal Space Program, in that you have a ship that detaches a separate lander that lands on a celestial body, say the Mun or Eve in this example. The lander then, does its thing on the surface, then rejoins the mothership, but the lander itself can't actually return to Kerbin. That's what the mothership is for. A direct ascent mission, on the other hand, is basically where the whole ship goes into orbit. The whole ship goes into orbit around wherever you want to land. The entire ship lands, the entire ship gets back into orbit, the entire ship goes back, if that makes sense. It's pretty much how most people do their first Mun or Minmus missions in KSP, for example, and it's how I would recommend doing a Mun or Minmus mission, because while Apollo, it makes sense, it makes more sense in real life. In Kerbal Space Program, just the scale of the game and just the way the parts work, it doesn't really make much sense from an efficiency and cost-saving point of view to do Apollo style. That's why direct ascent is preferred. But anyway, direct ascent for Eve in particular is much, much more difficult, because you need to not only engineer kind of a vessel that can lift up the dry mass of the crew parts and, the life support systems and all that. But you also need to be able to lift up the actual interplanetary transfer stage to get the ship back to Kerbin, which can take a significant chunk of Delta V. So, it is a bit harder to design a rocket that can perform a direct ascent Eve mission. But that's what the Expedition Eve landers were, mainly because Expedition Eve was like a machinima series, and I kind of wanted it to... I feel like it would just complicate things trying to show a docking procedure in that series. I don't know. I thought it'd be just... For the medium it was in, I thought it was more appropriate to do a direct ascent. But this is kind of... If I had no restrictions like that, like in this video here, this is how I would do it. Anyway, some of you may remember that right at the beginning of this video I said this was going to be a Blunderbirds episode, and if any of you watch my Planet Coaster series, Crimson Tower, which, statistically speaking, is none of you, but on the off chance someone watches both KSP and Planet Coaster on this channel, then you may have heard me recalling in my most recent video in that series, shameless plug for myself, I mentioned that I was trying to get this as a Blunderbirds mission. Some of you may have seen my comment on Reddit. I think it's sitting at about 80 upvotes. I think, off the top of my head, I could be way off, but I think that's what it's sitting at, where someone basically stranded 4 Kerbals on Eve's surface, on Eve's ocean, and I was like, this is a prime opportunity to do an Eve ocean rescue, because Eve ocean rescues are the hardest thing to do in KSP. But I contacted him, I liaised with him, and it all went well. I got all the mods installed, but this guy, and I know this because I counted them in the game data folder, he had 1 million mods. And I'm not exaggerating, he had 1 million exactly, to the decimal point. And I just was going through it, and he had atmospheric mods, life support mods, engine mods, all this, and I just couldn't... So basically, I like to keep Blunderbirds stock because I appreciate that some people might actually want to use these vessels for their own save files, and if I was using a bunch of modded parts, it would make things very difficult for people to try and, either use these videos as a resource or a tutorial to learn, do their own missions, or just to download the craft file and see how it works, play around with it themselves. That's why I like to keep, and this isn't just Blunderbirds, this is my entire channel, that's why I keep it stock. And I tried for a while to get it stock, like I was trying to selectively uninstall all the mods that affected the game, like, Eve's atmosphere ended at 50 kilometers on this guy's save file and things like that, and, just trying to make it work. In the end, I just couldn't, though, because he had a lot of life support mods that would have made the ship, not able to, the ship I needed to rescue Kerbals from, it would have meant that ship couldn't spawn if I got rid of those life support mods. So, Reddit user Rocker60, I'm very sorry. I couldn't. I tried. I mean, I've kind of showcased how to land near a target on Eve in the previous Blunderbirds episode. A link to the playlist is in the description and on screen at the end. So if you need help on landing precisely, then you can watch that. And then for everything else, you can watch this video here to get the lander yourself. So Rocker60 of Reddit, I believe in you. And I hope that you could use this video to save your Kerbals. And I'm sorry that I couldn't be the one to rescue them. But, maybe this is the universe saying that, you need to get yourself out of this mess that you've created. And that sounded really insulting. I didn't mean it to sound insulting. But, this is your chance. So anyway, that's why. That's the backstory. That's the origin story of this video. That's why it has such a high crew capacity, this lander. I had no intention of doing an... I guess I've kind of wanted to do an Eve, redo my Eve lander back in 2015 for a while now. I guess I kind of did that by proxy in Expedition Eve, but in that video the UI wasn't visible for most of it. It was just the Eve ascent, and I kind of wanted to just show how to do it, how to do it, basically. And some of you may have already be familiar with this ship, actually. I feel like this is now quite late on in the video, at just over 9 minutes. It's quite late on to now be mentioning this, but some of you may have seen the crash montage that I uploaded on Tuesday, I think. So, oh, by the way, there we are, splashed down. And now we're actually going to just talk about what's on screen. I'll get back to what I was talking about in a second, but here we are. Touchdown now, so we can detach the parachutes just to keep this thing stable. And there we are. I was going to say, some of you may have seen my crash montage, and you may have seen clips of the lander landed like this and trying to take off, and then suddenly the lander trying to take off without the inflatable heat shields to float it on the ocean. And this is why. The original plan was to have the lander like this, because as you can see, those inflatable heat shields create a wonderful floating platform for the rocket. They keep it nice and stable and upright. The Kerbals can walk around. They can't plant a flag, unfortunately. But, you know, it's not Blunderbirds. You don't need to plant the Blunderbirds flag, so there's no real obligation. But you can see here, we've got all the Kerbals lined up outside, you know, raised out of the liquid paint from Eve's Ocean. And it's great. It was such a good idea. But unfortunately, I was a little bit short-sighted in my design. The inflatable heat shields, when they're inflated, they all kind of clip into each other, which I didn't think would be a problem. This just goes to show I should probably have tested this craft before flying it. But you probably could have seen that little, this is just a demonstration of the ladder working, by the way, my ridiculous ladder here. But as you can see, when we try and launch it, everything just clips and it freaks the game out, and the Kraken is unleashed. And I tried many times. I had many a whiskey trying to get through it all, but just no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get it to work. And the reason for this is because of the fact that the game doesn't really like it when parts are clipping together. So I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried, and I tried some more. In the end, I had to give up. So I tried several means of detaching those shields. The full extent of these attempts can be seen in the crash montage, which you can click. But in the end, I quick loaded here, and what I did was I just detached one of the shields. A few times it didn't work, so I had to keep on sort of quick loading, quick saving, and quick loading again, and detaching just one of the individual shields. And eventually, it kind of glitched the game out in a way that didn't end up destroying the other parts. And you can tell no cheat. I probably should have activated the Alt F12 menu here just to show that no cheats were active. But there we go. But you can see things are exploding there. So clearly, you know, no crash damage and. Is it no crash damage and unbreakable joints? Are they the two? I don't know. I don't actually know. But yeah, you can see there were explosions, so clearly those cheats aren't active. There we go. So that was a thing. You can watch the crash montage in the description or at the end of this video if you really want to see the fullest extent of my pain that I had to go through for this video. I also, this is actually take 2 of the mission, by the way. The first time I forgot to add a ladder to the ship, which was a bit of a shame. So I landed it and I was like, oh, damn it. So I had to, you know, revert the whole flight and add the ladder and then redo the entire thing, which was annoying. I could have done without it, but whatever. And there we go. So it kind of, unfortunately, it tips over a little bit because those ladders end up sort of offsetting the center of mass, but not to the point where it capsizes. Some of you, well, I don't know if some of you might point this out or not, but this lander is actually incredibly over-engineered for an Eve ocean lander. Even an ocean lander with this kind of level of dry mass, it's still quite overbuilt. You could make it a lot smaller and have it do the same thing. The reason I've kind of built it like this is because having those external fuel tanks be quite wide and big, it provides quite a nice, first of all, it lowers the center of mass, but it also means that this thing has quite a large footprint, so it means it can float quite easily. I had a much smaller design that could lift off the same dry mass from, you know, sea level, but unfortunately it couldn't actually sit in the sea without capsizing. I'm sure if I'd put enough time into it, I could have come up with a slimmer design, but this is kind of a tried and trusted concept already from Expedition Eve, so I kind of knew how to make a buoyant lander. I thought, you know what, forget it, we'll just leave it as is. And with that, there's our takeoff. So I didn't really talk about the Kerbals on EVA because I guess there's not really a lot to discuss, but there we go. Yeah, not a lot really to say about the Eve Ascent. In fact, I don't really want to say a lot because I still don't really know the exact perfect takeoff methodology that you need for the most efficient takeoff. I tend to just tip it off. I tip it very, very slowly, 90 degrees on the nav ball, but not very much because Eve's atmosphere is very, very, very thick. After 40,000 meters, it's not so bad. That's why when you're doing an aero brake or entering Eve's atmosphere, you'll notice you don't really slow down that significantly. Then suddenly you'll start to kill off all your speed in a very rapid way once you reach the 40-kilometer mark. So that's just where the atmosphere gets really thick. So now we've passed that mark. You can see our speed is now rapidly increasing. I've throttled right the way down just so we can continue throttling up. Our apoapsis height is not yet out of the atmosphere though, because Eve's atmosphere extends to 90 kilometers. But you know, we got a ton of delta V in this stage remaining, over 1 kilometer per second, or as I finished that sentence, we don't anymore, but we did when I started that sentence, and then we can just sort of flatten it out, keep thrusting, and just cruise our way up. And then we're out of the atmosphere now in space. We can detach that stage and enter the vacuum stage using our Terrier engine, which is a much more efficient engine. Obviously, it doesn't have great thrust to weight ratio, so we had to make sure we had, a good chunk of our horizontal speed already dealt with by the lower stages, and then we can so we have time to circularize before hitting the atmosphere again with this upper stage. But we were fine. We've still got a bunch of delta V left over actually. So maybe I over-engineered this thing. Maybe you could even add, if you download this craft, you could add your own stuff to it. You could probably add another crew cabin, to be honest. But whatever. I'm not gonna put my word to that. Don't quote me on that. Even though I've literally just, you can literally quote me on that. Don't. Whatever. I could go back and delete that, but I'm not going to because I'm lazy. So now we're just going to do the simple act of docking. I mean, we don't have docking ports, so we're basically just going to get the ships nice and close together and just EVA the Kerbals across. I guess I could have done a docking port, but I mean, ideally I would have used the shielded docking port, but unfortunately in the the vehicle assembly building, or spaceplane hangar, I guess as well, you can't actually, if you open up the shielded docking port, you can't actually attach things to it even when you open it. If that makes sense. So it's very hard to use, at least I find, unless you're launching it or launching the rocket without anything already docked, it's not really worth it. So I thought I'll just go with the undocking. It's fine. The Russians did that. Well, they were going to do that for their concept of the moon missions. Their ships couldn't dock together either. The cosmonauts would have had to transfer from the mothership to the lander by doing a spacewalk. So this is an homage to that. Let's go with that. Let's just forget everything I said. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing a tribute to the Soviet Apollo mission. If you'd like to see a more detailed replica of that mission, then you can check out my channel, in which I did fully recreate that mission. Just another little shameless plug for myself. And there we are. I mean, I've just been basically stalling because I don't really know what to talk about at this point. I've done so many dockings where I've kind of illustrated the exact ins and outs of what I'm doing. It does get hard to talk about the same topics over and over again without it sounding dull and monotonous. So why not just talk about new topics sounding dull and monotonous instead? But there we go. Burning towards our target, getting our separation pretty much at 0 on the map screen, and then just burning retrograde, killing off all our speed, and then getting as close as we can by eyeballing, and then EVAing our Kerbals across. So to help out our friend from Reddit, Rocker60, you may have noticed that one of my Kerbals on this ship is actually called Rocker60 because I wanted to show him, not only show him in this video, but literally show him in this video. You see what I did there? Yeah. So I took Rocker60 with me to show him how it's done, and I hope that in that sort of spirit he can gain some knowledge from this video, baby. I don't know. I basically I just kept the 5 Kerbal design. Basically, I agreed to do a Blunderbirds mission. I kind of see one that I like on the subreddit. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And I'll message the OP and then just start working on the ship anyway. So I'm like, okay, well, we're going to send Jeb down to escort them up, and then I'll start building it, and then he'll send me the save file the next day, and then I'll film it. And I built this ship and then realized, I built this ship without the ladder. And then when I did the mission, I was like, oh yes, you need ladders on Eve, don't you? That is something you very much need. So that was a little bit of a setback. So yeah, there we go. We're all transferred across. Rocker60, I hope you appreciated me taking you on this journey, and you can take what you've learned, which hopefully is something. Hopefully you've learned something from this video. And so this transfer stage, the mothership has an enormous amount of delta V to get back to Kerbin, a huge amount, in fact, way more than what we really need. That's because I wasn't really sure what kind of trajectory we'd end up on. Well, when I first made this ship, I wasn't quite sure whereabouts his ship was crashed on Eve. So I'm like, if it would be in a place where I'd need to get into polar orbit, then I'd need quite a lot of fuel in my mothership stage to kind of get an accurate docking with the with the lander. So I thought, I'm not really sure what kind of position I'm going to end up with in the lander relative to the command pod in orbit. So let's just put a bunch of fuel in this thing. And also because a lot of people use Blunderbirds as a sort of semi-tutorial to, rescue their own Kerbals. I mean, Eve is still, even by using this video as a guide, which it's not a very good guide, but even using this as a guide, it's still like very, very, very difficult to do an Eve rescue. That's why I kind of wanted to do Eve and Tylo as the two of the places I really wanted to do the most in Blunderbirds. So this probably won't even be the last Eve rescue I do. I would still quite like to Maybe Blunderbirds will just from now on just be Eve rescues, because that's the hardest thing to do. And I mean, I feel like, you know, if you can rescue Kerbals from Eve, everything else will be no problem. Maybe Moho, Elu, and Tylo are other versions of that. And I guess Mun and Juna are always good ones to showcase as well, because those are typically, Mun is typically the first celestial body that people land on and strand Kerbals on, and Juna is typically the first interplanetary destination people go to. So maybe those are good places to do as well. But I don't think I really need to do another Drez, another Drez rescue mission. Really, I think that's pretty much no one goes to Drez. I was trying to think of how to end that sentence. I don't script these things. I don't know if you could tell. I don't know if you could tell this from the sheer quality of this rambling stream of consciousness. But yeah, I just completely lost my train of thought now. Here we are, entering Kerbin for the final time. We couldn't quite kill off all our speed to enter the ground straight away. We did end up leaving the atmosphere again, so we kind of did a sort of double jump re-entry. But it was fine. It was all fine. We've got enough parachutes to slow ourselves down at this point. And that's it. I mean, this lander itself is very inefficiently designed. Those 2-seat command pods, they're very, very heavy for what they are. It makes much more sense to use either 4 of those little lander cans or use the Mark 1 command pods, or literally anything other than those, Apollo-style command pods. But I thought, from an aesthetic point of view, efficiency wasn't really an issue for me for the interplanetary stage, because it's so easy to just add more liquid fuel for the nuclear engines. But there we are, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and Rocker60, I believe in you. So remember that, I believe in you. You can do this. You can do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Don't worry. So, and with that, on screen is a link to the music video version of this video, which I highly recommend if you want to watch it. Top right is the full Blunderbirds playlist if you want to watch that. That includes the Eve lander I did. The bottom left is a link to the blooper reel for this video. And the bottom right was just chosen for you by YouTube's algorithm. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.